You are interested in the unknown, the mysterious, the unexplainable. That is why you are here.
Welcome back to the Code Rad Show. Joining us is author John A. Brown, who is bringing back serialized pulp thrillers with his Victoria Hawthorne Chronicles, episode 3 of which is titled Teflon Therapy. Great title. John, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jason, for the invitation.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. Would you like to get started by telling us about Victoria Hawthorne?
Well, Victoria Hawthorne, the Victoria Hawthorne Chronicles, is an idea which I came up with around 2 years ago to have a female physician superheroine based here in Philadelphia who was a bit more than your average physician. She would be something along the lines of a superpowered vigilante, and it took me a while to work out the kinks, as it were. And the first episode premiered, I guess, a little over a year ago. And essentially, what you have is you have a character who is immortal. In that she is about 600 years old. She is descended from one of the final masters of the fabled order of the Knights Templar. And after the dissolution of the order in 1307, the order went underground. And the backstory is that the knights, of course, were no longer monks, and married and adapted a universal life of military practice and hired themselves out as mercenaries. And their children, both boys and girls, were trained to be the best warriors in the world, clandestinely. And Victoria obviously was among these. And basically, because of her aptitude, she was showed more and more advanced techniques. She made her way to the east to the fabled Ismaili assassins in what is now Persia, Iran. She learned from them, and along the way, ran into some Tibetan monks on the Silk Road. And from them, she learned about some techniques they had learned through tantric mysticism. And she hitched on with them, went further east, learned some advanced meditation practices and some mind control techniques and whatnot. But long story short, she ended up in Japan, where she found herself at the esoteric Shingon monastery at Mount Koya, where she fell in with the esoteric monks there. And I invented a group of priest assassins, which I dubbed the Sasori Ryu, the Scorpion School of priest assassins, who have a lineage based in antiquity within Japan, rooted in some rather shady samurai who got involved with the black arts, conjured up something that shouldn't have been conjured up. And the monks of Mount Koya, with the assistance of 3 monks who were repentant, basically created this order, and a boon from Lord Buddha to these 3 monks was enhanced combat power, clairvoyance, some schmaltzy supernatural powers, and an ability to attain immunity from natural death, disease, and poison through a very rigorous regime of physical training and tantric meditation and so forth. And eventually, Victoria made her way to this monastery and was admitted to these secrets. And this order basically has a sworn duty to protect the world from this cosmic evil which has been unleashed by these dastardly, demonic, ambitious samurai and their minions, and it's still sort of floating around the world. And that's basically the backstory, which I dreamed up using my my knowledge in my library of the occult and esoteric Buddhism and medieval history and whatnot. And to bring the story forward, she has been sort of gallivanting around for centuries doing this, that, and so forth. But in contemporary times, she is here in Philadelphia as a psychiatrist with all of the knowledge she has gained over the centuries and all of the wealth, of course. Everyone knows National Treasure, the great Templar treasure, which has been wisely invested. She has some land in France. She owns one of the hottest night spots here in the city called the Scorpion Club. Scorpions are a big motif everywhere, and I'm sure you've read episodes 2 and 3, so there's a lot of iconography in her weapons and so forth.
Yeah.
And basically, she uses her entree into the upper echelons of Philadelphia society and in other places to sniff out people who use their power and their influence to do very, very evil things, using networks of influence and so forth. The first group that she takes down, as I show in 2 and 3, are basically a very evil network of child traffickers, child molesters connected with an influential family rooted in this area who have lots of real estate holdings, and they meet a rather grisly end. And in episode 1, she runs into that art museum social where she's all rather fashionably attired. She runs into a Philadelphia detective, Jack Brill, who really falls for her in a way, and they kind of fall for each other. He kind of just disappears for 2 and 3 because she has business to take care of. But in episode 4, he makes a return. And 4 and 5, which I haven't written yet, but 5 is entitled Date Night, and the romance will ignite in episode 5. And she's going to be his love interest among many, many love interests she's had, including the reigning pope at the time of the story, who was a very hot and heavy with her when he was an FBI counterterrorism guy in New York back in the 80s when she had a different name. And she pitched in with some money and weaponry and some violence to help him out with something, and there's backstory there. So it's a very multi-layered, complex venture. It's very kinetic, action-wise. I've been told by certain people. Writing the fight choreography for the scenes takes me a lot of time. Episodes 2 and 3 each one took me about 3 especially. I'd say it took me about 2 to 3 months to put together the various fight choreography scenes, thinking it through, trying to see it. So it does get very detailed. It's all very visual. So it's a fun experience trying to write something like that. It's all original. Of course, there were influences here and there, as everything has an influence. I mean, that I read somewhere that there were something like maybe only a dozen general story plots available in the literary world. You have Hero's Journey, you have, the hidden kingdoms, the hidden caves, and so forth. So that, in sort of in a compressed view, is what the entire venture is about. And I have no general vision of how far this will go. I have no. It's basically it's just been launched. But I just predict a serialized version of adventures.
Mm-hmm.
Basically the sky's the limit at this point.
Reading the first 3 chapters, I got sort of a True Detective season 1 vibe, thematically especially. And now hearing you describe the backstory that the story is grounded in, that makes me feel like thematically there are some similarities with True Detective. How do you respond?
I've never seen True Detective season 1. I've never seen it. So I've never seen that. I pulled my themes basically from basically the general mythic themes, the general good versus evil conflict.
Yeah.
Pulling from what I know of Buddhist demonology, what I know of the Templar mythos, what I know of the assassins, and what I know of samurai and ninja lore, and also the rather rarefied realm of esoteric Japanese Buddhism and the different metaphysics there. So they're it's sort of a different way around. I do know that True Detective season 1 does delve very, very deeply into some philosophical points.
That's a big part of it, sure, yeah.
Yeah, but I've read a lot on my own over many years into Gnosticism, true Gnosticism, the original scriptures of the Valentinians and the Sethians and the Nag Hammadi lore and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. So I'm coming at it from sort of a different angle, sort of my own vision, as it were.
Gnostic themes in media is one of my favorite things. I love movies with a Gnostic theme, and I have to say I did not pick up on that in reading Victoria Hawthorne. That's very interesting. I'll definitely look for that.
Well, it hasn't been around. It hasn't been there long enough to really mature yet.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you're probably aware that the Templars were, very, very. I want to use the term implicated, but in having their various occult affiliations allegedly behind their downfall. Of course, historically, it was all basically over, the King of France basically being in hock over his head to them and needing needing some sort of, needing some kind of a setup basically to cast them down, but basically taking some other pieces of their legend through which things will come out later on, which is kind of like a blackmailing of the institution and things of that sort. So, yeah. I love Gnosticism myself. It's very interesting, and the fact that you had these various schools of competing and alternative views to Christianity, which had a root in Neoplatonism and synthesizing various forms of intertestamental Jewish thought, taking from maybe some Mithraism and some Oriental cultism at the time. Everything, it was an incredible eclectic mix at the time in the Roman Empire. It's incredibly cosmopolitan. And Gnosticism pulled literally from everywhere, including ancient Egyptian religion. Mm-hmm. Wonderful time. Antiquity has been an interest of mine since I've been 5 years old. So, I'm finally having an opportunity to employ all that creatively. So I'm rather keen on doing that.
Yeah, I love me some archons. I love different movies that portray archons in a different style, whether they may be a computer programmer, or you have a Truman Show type thing where there are filmmakers, subjecting some innocent person to a life on a movie set, whatever. There's a million variations, Dark City, etc. And yeah,
The
it's great
Matrix.
fiction. The Matrix, 100%. Recently watched The 13th Floor, which interestingly came out the same year as The Matrix and has a lot of similar themes, plot devices. So yeah, it's a really interesting subject to delve into. Let's see. So Victoria's background is very thorough. You've come up with a really intricate history for her, being an action hero and a vigilante. Her training as an assassin makes sense. When and why did she learn to become a psychiatrist?
Well, it's basically one of the many guises that she's assumed over the years. You would figure that I reason that if you're going to hobnob with an elite, people who would basically consider themselves above the herd, say, the kind of people who don't really have to worry about having a passport if they're going to travel somewhere, people who are universally recognized, people who never need a reservation to dine at the finest places, people for whom doors will open instantly, celebrity types, tycoons, things like that. It's been a constant trope in American popular culture that the glitterati always have a psychiatrist somewhere on standby. The trope of the Beverly Hills psychiatrist or the Manhattan Park Avenue psychiatrist. And on my way, and when I was walking in New York, you would walk around the Metropolitan Museum of Art and walk along Park Avenue. You would see the medical plates there on the luxury cars, these wonderful buildings with the nameplates of the psychiatrists there. And these are the people that don't take insurance. For the very wealthy people who have hyper first world problems. And these people pay cash to discuss all manner of things with physicians who have their confidence. And I reason that someone in that type of position would be able to access that world through quote unquote patients whose lives were rather dissolute. And Victoria, having the charge that she does under her vow and her oath and whatnot, and also the order to which she belongs and leads, would need to access a group of people at that level of society to find out exactly what they're up to. And hence the Honeycutt family, who are the heavies, so to speak, in, she, like, for example, Egbert Honeycutt, the U.S. attorney, comes in with him and his mother and some lawyers, basically, one day into her office, and rather than lock him up, here's a $10 million premium, whatever, and she's your patient, and you'll straighten him out. And she basically just uses the opportunity to learn everything about him. She opens her red file and then takes it from there. And of course, she has her her ex-French Foreign Legion mercenary contacts and does all of the sleuthing behind the scenes to find out all about them and sets them up for what she needs to do. It's basically just it's a way of her acquiring wealth, acquiring contacts. Eventually, there'll be a time where she'll just have to, fold her tents and move elsewhere. Because, there'll be a time when she's just going to remain the same sexy vixen that she is now and that she's been for 600 years. And it's going to be like a Dorian Gray situation. And people would start to notice. I mean, that's kind of been the way it's always been. So it's just basically a device. I mean, she's had other identities and other things she's done throughout her life. Obviously, a warrior being one of them. She's probably, I would imagine, had been involved in the First and Second World Wars and other dust-ups. She's been a mercenary. Somewhere in this, in her home office, which debuts at the beginning of episode 4 that I just dropped last night. She has a interesting structure that she's built on the southern side of Locust Street at 20th, called the Crystal Castle, which is a very large, elaborate steel-and glass structure with 4 distinctive towers at each corner with a crenellated top. And it's kind of this ever-shifting interior, almost like a Hall of Mirrors building. I don't detail interiors very much. I don't really get much into, like, the hallway was 5 feet long, 50 feet long, and this, that, and the other. I leave a lot of it open because I like to people to kind of, for as far as when I get into describing like her home and her building and her consulting office, because the decor shifts around a lot. In his first manifesto of surrealism, Andre Breton used an excerpt from Crime and Punishment, in which he basically used part of Dostoevsky's narrative where he's describing where the old pawnbroker woman lives. And Dostoevsky being a great author, but this particular piece of prose that Breton extracted is basically, she lived in in her place was, the wallpaper was, had faded roses on it, and her drapes were yellow, and the window was this, and it goes into almost this laundry list of details. And Breton argued, like, what is the purpose of that? All you need to do is say, she lived in this small, dingy room. And you could just fill in your own imagination with what a dingy room entails. You don't need to have spoon feed to the reader exactly every single detail. And given the way that this whole thing is set up, it's very obviously very fantastic, totally out of left field, totally out there. She has this medieval sorcerer or contemporary evil inquisitor from her time, who is also immortal, though aside from instead of some physical discipline of meditation, asceticism, and physical training, as you would think from an evil inquisitor, he has gotten his faculties through actual transacting some business with some beings from a very, very hot place under the earth, so to speak.
Awesome.
And he also has the ability to shapeshift. So he could be, I mean, in the sense of become different people. So you may see him, and he's basically had this beef with her, and he's been showing up and throwing a monkey wrench into her quest or crusade or against evil throughout the centuries. and has been showing up periodically as the heavy sometimes. And one of my ideas has been to cast him as a very big heavy at some level in this whole mishigas that I am currently engaged in. So we need to have a little bit of the fantastic and the preternatural here, of course. And of course, there are human beings who are in league with these forces to, feather their own nests. As in any classical good versus evil myth, there's always people on different sides who have taken up arms, for whatever reason, or fence sitters like Dante's opportunists at the threshold of hell. People who just see from which way the wind blows and and try and exploit whatever opportunities come their way. And so there's definitely a lot to unpack, a lot that I still have to unpack. There's still a question of what role I'm going to give Detective Jack Brill. I'm sure you noted that in the first episode, they did have a bit of aside from all of Jack Brill's being very hot and bothered, they did have something of a bit of a metaphysical discussion about evil and good and evil. So there was a bit of a tete-a-tete there about that, which was done in all earnestness between them. And as they used to say in university, you will see that again. Because I'm a firm believer in the old saw of Chekhov's gun. If you have the gun on stage in Act 1, it must be used sometime by Act 3, otherwise it doesnn't belong there.
That's a rule you can't violate unless you have a really good reason.
I love to put little clues, foreshadowing, sly references. As you could probably tell, Vicky is a very big fan of films. She loves Basic Instinct and loves snark and one-liners, and I love to have like a lot of humor thrown in here and there. I've gotten that, obviously. I mean, the influence there is the 80s and 90s canon films, Sylvester Stallone, Schwarzenegger, typical USA rah-rah action flick. You have the one-liner that where the hero will put down an enemy with some cheesy one-liner, like the death of Howie Freddie Mercury Stein in episode 3.
Yes.
Number 1 bites the dust. And things like that. So that's kind of one of her little shticks. She likes to do lots of one-liners and snarky off-color remarks and jokes and jibes and things. And I love throwing in little references here and there for people to pick up on. But there's also, I do a lot of sly references and for people to pick. So there's a lot of clues. I do a lot of clues. And because I like to do that myself, if I'm doing a critique, a film review like the Miss 45s or the Stand, looking at things like that, I always like to dig deep and look for symbolism. And because to me, that adds the layering in the story. It just there's something it's something when it shows that there is care that's gone into something. When you add levels of deeper meaning and you put symbols in there, or you put little vague foreshadowing, and it shows that, for me as a writer, it shows that you can make just a small vague reference and then bring that back later. And I know I've experienced this, and then you'll see it, bam, at the end. Wait a minute, I saw that in the beginning.
You plant the seed that sprouts later.
Exactly. In fact, I just finished. I finished last night because I usually as a writer, all writers should be readers. That's a canonical rule, or it should be.
Absolutely.
And I just finished last night the third volume of Robert Ludlum's Jason Bourne trilogy, The Bourne Supremacy. All three books are rather good. They have nothing to do with the Matt Damon series.
Oh, really?
They have nothing at all to do with it. Nothing at all. Matt Damon, except for the title, they really have nothing to do with it. The books are rather turgid. Each one is at least 700 pages in length.
Wow.
And they're rather. I mean, they came out in the early 80s when large bestsellers like that were heavily in vogue.
Yeah.
And the plot lines are very, very involved and complex, and it's like reading books which are giant puzzles.
Yeah.
They are far more interesting than the stuff which Tom Clancy put out. They're much more in the line of John le Carré, things of that sort. It's a lot more involved, more like a mystery, actually.
I'm a big le Carré fan. Have not read Ludlum. Your stories did remind me a bit of Frederick Forsyth. Have you read?
I love Forsyth. Forsyth, the Odessa File is a classic work. I also love the film with John Voight and Maximilian Schell.
I recently read Dogs of War.
The Dogs of War is an excellent book.
Yeah,
an excellent book
about an international squad of mercenaries.
Well, it's basically, it takes place in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is based on, and it's strange you mentioned Dogs of War, because warfare in the third world, guerrilla warfare, is an interesting issue. I just picked up a book, a brand new book, in fact, about the assassination of Patrice Lumumba and the rise of Mobutu, simply called the Lumumba Plot. And it just came out literally a couple of months ago. I just picked it up. I also have the memoir called Mercenary. The British officer who wrote it escapes me right now. But my very first published works, way before I got involved in the creative sphere, one of my old professors that I kept in contact with at university, she was a Cold War scholar, and I kept in touch with her for a long time. She knew that I read voraciously, and she at the time was book review editor for the journal Intelligence and National Security. And so she said, "Hey, John, why don't you become one of my reviewers?" And so I said, fine. So I was published in the journal. My book reviews were published in Intelligence and National Security, I want to say maybe 6 or 7 times in the 2000 aughts. I'd say maybe between 2005, 2007. And I reviewed books on urban guerrilla warfare, presidency and covert operations. I even did a review on the of the very first English language mass publication edition of Osama bin Laden's pronunciamenti speeches and interviews and such, which Verso Publications put out. So I did a whole slew of that stuff, but my actual creative stuff didn't start doing creative stuff until about the pandemic. When I started writing my poems.
Interesting. Yeah.
The first poem was the Florentine Nocturne poem, which had a different title when I first did it. And then things kind of went from there. My earliest work, of course, is all on the Crypts and Cloisters substack. The Victoria Hawthorne stuff is the new project.
All right. Well, John, it sounds like the first few chapters of the Victoria Hawthorne Chronicles only hints at the vast scope of this world that the story takes place in. I look forward to continuing reading it, and people can find it at Substack, right?
They can find it at Substack.
I'll post a link.
Post a link to that, and please post to my other one as well.
Definitely.
And another thing, one thing I've been kicking around, people have also mentioned to me that the exploits would make an interesting graphic novel as well. But apart from that, though I can write, I cannot draw. And I would love to have someone try and make an artistic rendition of my character.
Yeah.
And so make an attempt at an artistic rendition. So if anyone would like to discuss that with me, I would like just to have some sort of an image. That would be
absolutely.
A nice
yeah. Get any artists who are watching this, get in touch with John. How would they get in touch with you? Because I notice you do not do social media at all.
I do not do any social media because social media is nothing but a time suck, as they say. When I started writing on Medium and Substack, I followed. I'm totally flew my own venture as far as getting into creative writing. I don't have the only writing instruction I have are the 2 writing courses I had in university. I do not have an MFA, which seems to be kind of a pass into writing today, which I think is worthless, useless. Everything has become a business for some reason because people make a lot of money from it. I basically just watch a lot of Jenna Morasi's writing videos on YouTube, bought a lot of books, and did some research on my own. And that's when I say, oh, well, they say you should have an online presence. So I had a Facebook, I had an Instagram, I had a Twitter, I had all of this. But all it does is you get drawn into these interminable debates about things which have nothing to do with your writing, and it wastes your time, and you have nothing to work on but your writing, and it gets you just upset, like watching the news gets you upset. So people can just email me. They could just email me at jabrown100, all one word, at hotmail.com. I only get junk mail in my email box anyway, so
right.
Why not?
Well, thanks for coming on, John.
Thank you, Jason.
I enjoyed the conversation.
Pleasure and privilege.
So everyone.